Yeah, it's always the joy of like Riverside does the countdown thing, whether you want to or not. Like, go.
So I'm so excited to be sitting down with you. We talk a lot, not recorded. And so to
Yeah.
do so in a recorded way is mostly just my not very subtle attempt to get you to start creating content. Because as I keep nagging you, I think of you in many ways as more unfiltered than many people. And the metaphor I use is the Prof G, the Galloway of HR and remote work and a bunch of other kind of topics about work in the modern world. You've got a lot of brass knuckle opinions that go against the grain,
Yeah.
and I'm on a kick to get you to share them some more.
Well, I'm
So
glad. I'm
that's
very glad to do it and do it here with you and do it out loud and all the rest of it too. And you'll, as you dig it, we'll dig into this. I'm sure get into like why do I hold back on some of that stuff about doing it myself? I hate looking at my own face. All the usual joys of like Midwestern roots.
you're going to be on stage with your longtime collaborator Helen at Responsive Conference.
Yes.
We'll get into all of the details of that, but the thing you're going to be talking about there, or rather leading an interactive session on, is AI. And
Yeah.
you hold a lot of controversial opinions about AI, not arguing that it's significant in the world, not arguing that it's going to displace jobs,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of idealization
Oh God.
of like, okay, 10% job growth in the next couple of years, and right, like all of these kind of pie in the sky ideas. What do most people get wrong about AI in your opinion?
There's a couple things. One is senior leaders sit on polar ends of the spectrum on this stuff, and very infrequently sit in the middle, which is kind of where I find myself too often on some of this. You have the CEOs who are like, oh my God, this changes everything. They're the ones out there doing the scare tactics. Like, if you don't adopt now, your career is over and you're doomed. The loudest voices in that happen to be the arms merchants, right? The dudes that are there to sell you the tools. So it shouldn't surprise anybody that, Mark Benioff and Andy Jassy and, Zuckerberg and Sam Altman all think this is going to be huge and massive because they're pouring literally tens of billions of dollars into these tools. And unless it does displace labor, it's really hard to see how they make it up in revenue, right? These are massively expensive things to provide to people. So they kind of got to believe it, and they kind of got to sell it, and they kind of got to shove it down the throats of their own teams, right? The demand to do more with less type of stuff that's happening, especially in tech. So you got that world, and then you got the other side, which is like, this is all going to blow over. It's yet again another like one of these fads of productivity software that really doesn't have much impact, and so play along, use it some, but don't sweat it too much. And both of those extremes are just wrong. Nothing ever changes that fast, but this one, if you've been using it and playing around with it, and I have, it is dramatically different. And you can do things as a human that give you expertise you didn't have before, right? It's an extender of capability. And I think what gets missed is just like, this is material, but the other part that gets missed is like, the organizational craft of driving adoption is not about handing out tools. It's all emotional. It is all about whether or not people lean towards fear or aspiration around this. It's whether or not, God forbid, you're investing in your frontline managers to sit with their teams, to take the time to play around with this stuff. This is part of what Helen is great at, my co-presenter. Get people the time and space as a team to play around with these tools. And I mean literally play around with them. Do stuff with them that has nothing to do with the job of your team. Because if you play with it together, it's a much more comfortable space to experiment, to do stuff that feels weird and wacky. Figure out what's in your fridge and create a recipe for dinner tonight, but use the tools to do it. Take a snapshot of your refrigerator, upload it, tell it to figure it out. Like, holy cow, well, that's a sucky recipe, but it could do that, right?
Yeah.
This is crazy. And by doing that, you're doing two things. You're starting the conversation with people about like, okay, what's acceptable here, right? It's not just you're giving people access to the tools where they're seeing the capabilities. You're starting a group conversation about what's acceptable use for us. Is it okay for me to use this to draft my performance appraisal of myself, my self-assessment, right? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Are we okay with that, boss? Like, those kind of conversations are actually meaningful, especially when you read some of the research and you realize like there's a whole bunch of people out there that are using these tools and hiding it from their manager because they feel like,
Right.
I'll be seen as a cheat.
I'm old enough, just barely, that I remember in high school not being allowed to use scientific calculators in calculus, right? And there's okay, what is the utility? I think one of the more interesting and thoughtful, intellectual, and like politically relevant podcasts in the world today is Ezra Klein's the Ezra Klein show on the New York Times. And he's talking about like, okay, what's the purpose of writing an essay in college, right? Because can ChatGPT, especially at, the paid versions, do better research than I can in less time? Maybe.
Right.
But as a writer, the things that and this isn't a new idea, but right, we're,
Yeah.
my partner and I, in contract on a house right now and writing a sob story plead letter, sales letter to the seller, as everyone does, saying why we love the house and why we should get it for a discount.
Yeah.
I'm much better at writing that letter than ChatGPT can ever be, because only Robin Zander can write that letter.
Yeah.
And all of the writing I've done over the last 2 years makes that letter better.
That's right.
That's why I train writing. It's
Exactly.
in my voice. Right. And ChatGPT has informed it, for sure. But the utility of doing the thing is not the thing itself, it's what it trains, right? I'm fascinated in my whole life, my whole career, but also in my athletic life by skills that train skills, by meta learning.
Yeah.
Josh Waitzkin, the character in the movie and book Searching for Bobby Fischer, after having a world-class career in chess, went on to big wave surfing. And then, blanking on the name right now, but fin, right, where it's a smaller board on a fin that can catch waves that you can't catch on a surfboard. And to train that, he looked at like, okay, the amount of time you catch on waves, and speaking as a surfer, is pretty minimal. But he was in New York and he was like, okay, I'm not going to go surfing in New York all day, every day. What I can do is I can ride one wheel, right? The one wheel on a board that's like an electric skateboard all over Manhattan. And so he got thousands of hours of practice doing the same skill in a different context.
That's
and
awesome.
I'm fascinated by that because it's so hard to study. It's so hard to see. It's so hard to assess.
Yeah.
We don't know yet, right? What is the impact on our brains of using AI all day, every day, of using generative AI, of using ChatGPT for research? But what are the things that it can train that aren't the thing we're training itself? And I feel like that's something you're thinking about that I'm not hearing a lot of people talk about yet.
Yeah, and there's some preliminary research coming out saying that it does basically make us dumber.
Yeah.
You outsource the thinking skills to the device and you get less sharp. And there's things that we know from past practice in other areas that, the practice of a thing, the 10,000 repetitions type of thing, there's some truth to that in terms of what it does. But there's also this balance between doing that sort of performance mode and growth mode, and like trying and learning new skills as well, which is what Finn, what you're getting at with the example there. What I do myself is I'm a decent writer, not a great writer, but I want to continue to get better. I actually have set up a Claude project that is my editor, but it is not my writer. It is expressly like, here are my guidelines, here's my voice, here's my tone. I want you to keep me on tone and make sure I'm not going off base on this. And here's examples of what I've done that I'm proud of, that I like, that I wrote.
Nice.
Now I'm going to give you my 80% complete, column, and I need you to help me clean it up. That was like, I literally did that last night to get today's column out. And it comes back and it cleans my stuff up. It makes me more concise. And then I look at it and like, you rejected some stuff I don't want to reject. I want that colloquialism back in there. I want that specific example back in there. That I think that's important to me. And then there's times too when I'm like, that's just clunky. I don't want to, you're damn wrong. But I wouldn't know
it's
that.
A couple of too many M dashes.
Oh God, yeah. They used dashes well before the stuff existed. It makes me kind of nuts.
The secret is that ChatGPT's M dashes are double length versus M dashes, the way I write them, have a space on either side.
Yeah, I do that.
And so you can just prove that ChatGPT didn't write it in your email by adding the space.
Space on either side of it. I've had editors correct my M dashes in the past by getting rid of the spaces. Yeah. Professional human editors who, by the way, still are better than ChatGPT. I will take I work with Charter and Sloan Management Review, and the editors that I work with there are fantastic. And they are wicked better because they're not copy editors. They are editors. They know how to take a story and go like, you're not telling the story right, dude. You're out of sequence and order. If you want to capture your audience, start here instead. This is your lead graph. Like, they're just much better because they've been immersed in that art.
Yep.
They're better than me. They're better than the device.
So quick reference for you and for everyone. Google The Gap and Ira Glass. It's a voiceover turned into a video on Vimeo that was put out in 2014. And it talks about the importance of specifically taste. And the gap refers to the difference between the thing that we as creators imagine doing and the thing that we can do when we start. And he offers the solution. And this is, Ira Glass, the all-time famous and best podcaster and voice, radio host, of practice, right? Just getting in the reps, which is
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. There's a thing too in that I interviewed a guy named Nick Petrie a couple of weeks back and chatted with him and did a column on his work around burnout and what causes and what drives burnout, but more importantly, what solves it for people. There's also research that shows that like being in that repetitive perform mode at some point hits a diminishing return. Matter of fact, there's evidence that says that doctors that do this exact same thing over and over and over again for years and years and decades on end start to degrade in terms of performance, right? And what
Yep.
you need to do is you need to mix in some growth. You got to mix in that perform and exploit on the thing that you're now really great at with what's something that's going to stretch you outside your boundaries, because that gives you new muscles that you build that probably make you better at the core thing, but also gets you out of the rut that you're probably finding yourself in. And that also just goes to like literally also the difference of like personal growth, which is not new skills. It's like, what's my purpose? Why am I actually doing this in the first place? Is this really all there is to my life, my career? Is it all about my career? Like, God, I've got the balance, all that kind of gnarly hard stuff that if you're gonna do it right, generally requires either like you got to step back hard or you're forced to step back hard because you hit a wall.
Yep. In the spirit of my attempt in this podcast to get you to create more content and to really embody your Prof G, which maybe we'll stop referencing Galloway
That's
and
okay.
more who is Elliot that is like outspoken and not hiding,
Yeah.
because you've got really strong opinions, and I really appreciate it when you share them one on one with me as a like, oh, I'm not actually hearing people say that. What is it about AI? So recognizing there's people on these two extremes. What do you believe that most people get wrong, and what are we going to see in the next couple of years?
I think that I do think it's augmentation. I think like my own beliefs about this continue to grow and morph because the tools themselves continue to change, and what we learn from watching people experiment and try these tools out continues to change. I actually think that increasingly it is going to come back to stuff that is about if you're going to be effective in this world, you are increasingly relying on EQ skills, not IQ skills, right? I think there are tons of people. I'll give you a really clear set of ones on this. I worked at Google for enough years and led software development teams and know how Google hired engineers. And your ability to do great, deep algorithmic work was what got you advanced and promoted and everything else. Well, shit, that's coming to an end. And increasingly, firms are sitting there saying, look, I still need people who have that developer's mindset because a developer's mindset is able to think about hypotheses and structure thoughts in ways that are actually really valuable when using these tools. But wow, human communication skills just went from being like, they kind of suck at it, but it's okay because they really are a good programmer to being like, this is not acceptable. Your job increasingly is to be someone who's in the middle of the muck that's helping discern like what's the problem we're actually trying to solve in the first place and using the tools to do it. And I think we're going to end up blowing up entire classes of job descriptions, right? That are going to go away and disappear. And I think you're going to end up going from like what was becoming an increasingly specialist world where specialist skills were the most valuable thing that got you advancement in careers to like good generalists who are capable of
Yep.
generating hypotheses, thinking about second order consequences, communicating with clarity, driving vision are becoming more and more and more valuable because the tools are going to give you the specialized skills and knowledge. You still need human intervention to sell it the rest of the way, to get it connected, to aim it in the right place. I don't think we're headed to a world where the tools do all that because that's just really a hard bridge for most of us as humans to cross to do it. And I think people are kind of getting it wrong because they're seeing this as how do I get my software developers to do more faster? Great, that's freaking output. How about instead we rethink the roles of the people that are even on the team and get rid of our traditional hierarchies and think about what small groups can do when aligned around a common purpose to just drive something forward, whatever that purpose happens to be.
When I feel like escaping from the current world of politics and work, I've been rereading the Steve Jobs bio by Walter Isaacson, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm just struck again and again by his skills were politics, persuasion,
Yeah.
charisma, storytelling, right? They were durable skills. They were what we call soft skills, right?
Yeah.
And they were, back to the Ira Glass video, taste, right? He
Yeah.
was both a taste maker. He saw technology waves. He was enough of a technologist that he was able to, be savvy in making early home computers with Wozniak, but he himself was less technologist and more storyteller, right? I'm also reading Empire of AI about Sam Altman and OpenAI, and really interesting book, kind of a, fast-paced thriller through the world of OpenAI since 2019 and written kind of against OpenAI in many ways. May or may not be true. There are other books that are more written with Sam
Mhm.
Altman's permission and consent, but Sam Altman is a deal maker.
Yeah,
Like that is his primary skill,
yeah,
right? And when I look at his career, the number one thing that he has done, whether that's, befriending Thiel or taking over as CEO of Y Combinator,
yeah,
he's been a deal maker, and that has paved the way for everything he's done. I
yeah.
think that even it's easy to get caught up in AI. Using ChatGPT specifically for me in real estate this year has changed my conception of what can be done. I'm buying my first property
Yeah.
with my partner. The research that I've been able to do using ChatGPT to like research mosquito remediation, research the impact of redwood tree roots on
Yeah.
foundational structure is incredible. And yet at the same time, we need humans now more than ever. We need human connection now more than ever.
There's this, I was going to say that to that point, there's this piece that Upwork just put out. I'm a data geek. I love research. Kelly Monahan at Upwork put out a report literally this morning looking at like people who are the heaviest duty AI users today and what's different about them. And one of the things is, yes, they're more productive. They're also wickedly more burnt out. Their burnout
Interesting.
rates, they're like 88, they're like 40% more productive than their peers. They're 88% more burned out than their peers,
Hmm.
right? Now, that may be because in some places they're being, in big tech in particular, what's happening is the load is being shoved on people, right? Like adopt or die. And that doesn't lead to good long term consequences freaking ever. But even setting that aside, the other thing that's really wild about it is they're more likely to believe that their own company's goals when it comes to AI are bullshit.
Yeah. Okay.
They're deep enough into the tools, they're like, it's either extreme, right? I'm deep enough in the tools. Remember my thing about like CEOs typically sit on one end of the spectrum or the other. Like, this is all going to blow over and go away. If you're using the tools heavy duty and your CEO is saying like, then you know that's BS. But if your CEO is also like, this is going to change everything radically, and you're deep in the tools, you're like, some of this shit just doesn't work. I've tried this thing 15 times. I mean, my favorite example of that is CTO in organizations just bought the Kool-Aid, right? He's like, this is going to be great, and I expect people to be able to do 30% more. And several of his senior team members are like, it's not working that well. And so what they do is they take like their five best developers, like the sort of ex engineers, which is also kind of BS. But they say, why don't you guys try it out, and we want you to really tell us what you think. And they come back and they say, it's helpful, but we've got embedded decades plus of code base. We've got all these use cases we have to think about. We've got all the ways in which this stuff has to stitch together. It's kind of good at the basics. It's not so good at complex work. We have to QA it. Like 10% gain, boss. Get a small grip on where we are today. Will that change over time? Sure, but you've got to get into the tools yourself to be conversant on this. And if you're drinking the Kool-Aid, you're probably being sold something. And if what you're doing is you're drinking the Kool-Aid and then you're shoving it down your team's throat and saying, crank up the demands, you're cranking up the burnout too, which is not going to lead to what you want either.
I want to shift to return to work. It's something that, or return to office, return to in-person working.
All my favorite topics of like, yes.
That's the goal, is to give
Yeah.
you to give you some red meat. We've been talking about remote and distributed work at Responsive Conference since 2016. I
Yeah.
interviewed Joel Gascoigne on stage in 2016, who was at the time the CEO of the largest fully distributed company in the world. And that was before, the GitHubs of the world, before people really were like trying to fight for that title.
Yeah.
We both know Shelby Wolpa, who's
Mm-hmm.
also going to be on stage at Responsive,
Fantastic.
who led InVision, which was a huge, fully distributed company. I don't know how big they were, but thousands of employees. And now, post COVID in 2025, I'm seeing it very firsthand. My girlfriend works at Intel, and Intel just did a mandatory 4 days a week return to office without regard to the fact that 5 years ago, like everyone was in office, and now there's not nearly the benefits provided. Everyone has moved long, many hours commute, if not, flights away from the office. Like, how did they deal with that, right?
Yeah.
So what are you seeing done well? And I'll go the other direction. I run a film studio. I am literally in my film studio right now. There is an undeniable utility right? When you and I sat down to talk at a responsive conference this year, we met at Robin's Cafe
Yeah,
because even though that's, whatever, a 20-minute commute for each of us in across the Bay Area, it was worth sitting down in person to talk about what we were going to do
exactly.
together. So, given that humans should gather in person, that we are physical beings, and yet that, most of our work, if we're privileged enough not to be working front lines of a coffee shop, can be done over Zoom,
Yeah.
can be done in writing, can involve these tools, these digital information based tools. What's the answer to how to do remote and distributed work better and how to do mandatory or optional coming back to gathering in person on a regular basis as part of company culture consistently, clearly, and well?
So there's a couple things there to unpack. And we'll get into like why some CEOs are actually doing it. Your girlfriend's at a place that, by the way, has run rounds of layoffs and is trying to cut costs. And it's not surprising that people sit there and say this is a form of a soft layoff, right? Where I don't have to pay you severance if you quit over the fact that I've cranked up the demands yet again. I mean, for God's sake, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy said it about the federal government. We want people to quit. This is a way to get rid of people without paying them to quit. It literally is that in a lot of these cases. The challenge is two things. One, letting a thousand flowers bloom, every individual their own unique choice, doesn't work very well either, right? Different organizations have different needs as they're doing this. We put everybody in this gigantic live experiment in 2020, 2021 of working remotely, and it generally sort of worked. But then a lot of companies took an answer being a policy statement. Policy statements aren't answers to any way in which we improve how we work. A policy statement that said it's 2021, we want everybody back in the office when you come back, but 3 days a week is pretty good. Companies that did that actually probably did fine. Matter of fact, I've talked to a lot of them. They're like, yeah, we're not changing it. It sort of works. This isn't our biggest problem. We're not doing things. The
Ooh,
companies that have,
I just want to flag that companies asking what's our biggest problem,
yeah,
I think is actually like a very interesting solution.
yeah,
Because yes, is it a tension that every organization needs to balance, right? The responsive manifesto is more relevant now than it was 10 years ago because it outlines tensions to balance,
yeah.
not solutions provided, right? And a tension is exactly what I said. We run a film studio. You have to have people on set, and yet people work from all over. How do we balance this? Is that the biggest problem that the organization needs to solve or not,
Yeah, and a
right?
great starting point I do with CEOs is like, what problem are you trying to solve? But
Nice.
you decided the solution is get people back in the office more often. But tell me what problem it is you're trying to solve in the first place, and do you have evidence of it? Because if you do, then we should dig deeper on that evidence and understand. For example, I have seen situations where productivity has fallen. Well, define productivity and where is it? Well, our junior salespeople who are fully remote aren't as effective as our junior salespeople who are in person. Cool. Now let's get to the next layer. Should you, the CEO, be making that decision, or should your head of sales be making that decision? And is that the right answer for everybody in your organization, or is that the right answer for your early stage salespeople and their managers? Because any organization past minimum scale starts to get really complex, and these complex organisms demand answers that don't always get held by the CEO. And move it down a notch works really well. Second one is tell me how your talent strategy on two dimensions. Are you after best, highest quality talent that you want to have deeply engaged? Because I guarantee you, cranking up a return to office policy is not going to help their attitude and their engagement. It's going to fall, right? And there's plenty of
If
it.
the people who stay at your company have to commute 2 hours each way through traffic, and that's 4 hours out of their day that they are both not working and not spending doing the rest of their lives, are they going to be happier or less happy working for your organization?
That's right, exactly. And the second part of that talent strategy is are your teams co located or are they distributed? The guy that asked Jamie Dimon the question and said, hey, boss, can we have some managerial latitude? Wasn't asking it about commute lengths for his team. He's a guy that manages an IT team where nobody sits in the same office. They're spread out across time zones. It is freaking stupid for him to make his team march into an office 5 days a week because that cuts back on their collaboration time. Matter of fact, it actually makes it harder for them to do their core jobs. And so this is where you start getting into things which are the top down mandate usually actually isn't about finding a solution for the organization or to a problem. It's about a CEO who wants more control, who's afraid that people aren't working hard enough, doesn't trust their managers to manage people effectively, or just needs to have people around them and to feel that the feels of like, I'm feeling the vibe, right? And doing this stuff. But there are real genuine problems, and the answer is not to try to uniformly apply it or to let everybody figure out their own. It's almost always like the better solutions come from things that are like what problem we're trying to solve, and what's the right place to make that decision. Because I'm a huge believer that teams have to have norms to be effective, right? Your time together is honestly sometimes the least important one of those. What hours of the day are we available to each other for calls and meetings, especially if we're spread across 2 or 3 time zones, is like essential. What tools do we use for what purpose is essential. How do we make decisions? Who's got what level of decision making authority? What role do I play in this project? All that stuff is actually wickedly more important than how many days a week we're in the office. But you can take that as a starting point, and you can have a team conversation about what are our norms and why do they exist. And even just getting that stuff down on paper will help you clear out a lot of misconceptions, onboard new team members more quickly, and get rid of some of the stuff that we usually think of as being like, well, the way you learn the organization is you work here for 2 years and then you kind of got it figured out.
Yeah.
Sad, but true.
What, like, we are living in a more chaotic time than any in my lifetime, right? I would say more chaotic than any time, more challenging than any time since certainly the Great Depression.
Yeah.
I mean, I came to San Francisco fresh out of undergrad in 2000, late 2007, early 2008. And so, and I bussed tables for 2 weeks, quit, became a personal trainer, and walked into Crunch Fitness and was told, like, oh, if you had been here 6 months ago, clients were paying up the wazoo all over the place. And
Yep.
now, like, my old client jumped out a window because he lost his fortune as a banker. Like, welcome to fitness. You're not going to get clients, right? Like, that was my introduction to work. So I remember I've seen a couple of boom and bust cycles now, right?
Yeah.
You've seen more.
Yeah.
I wasn't in the work world professionally in 2001. But there is more chaos. There is more ridiculousness going on. There is more unpredictability. One of the name brand universities where we are in the Bay Area, UCSF, has all of their hiring frozen right now because NIH funding to universities is frozen because of the Trump administration.
Yes.
I don't, unfortunately, as much as I wish things were going to get calmer, think that things are going to get calmer over the next couple of years. So, what advice do you give to organizations that you consult, to CEOs, to leaders, or to your sons, right,
Yeah.
who are entering the work world themselves, as I understand it, to like keep pace with the rate of change, to adapt amidst chaos, and to cultivate themselves to thrive amidst greater levels of uncertainty and chaos, and hopefully not, but maybe even political violence. We've seen political violence in the streets. We have the McKnight Foundation from Minnesota on stage at Responsive, and right, they
Mhm.
had senators murdered in their homes. Like,
Yeah.
how do we respond to that as organizations and as compassionate individuals leading organizations who have to balance the needs of people? And I don't run a business unless my business makes a profit.
Yeah, I have my own thoughts on like the broader context around this, and especially like people bowing to rising authoritarianism that bugs the living shit out of me. And that's like we can get into that as well, and I'm glad to. From an individual like leader perspective and individual perspective, the two biggest things from to my mind are resilience and trust. It's going to require resilience to get through this. The world is not getting easier. I grapple with this stuff myself. My wife and I talk about it regularly. Resilience as a leader means you've got positive realism, not positive optimism, positive realism. I recognize the issues around us. I'm willing to talk about it with you as a team, but I'm going to try to steer us towards what can we do to influence the situation we're in? What options do we have? What opportunities might this create? How do we support one another, right? And so
Yep.
that's a really important thing. If you don't acknowledge it, it's really problematic. Target's a great case study in this, by the way. The CEO managed to wait, I don't know, 3 or 4 months before he put out an all hands missive after after the backlash to their backlash to DEI had gone awry on them, after sales had started falling, after several other things had happened, after supply chain threats, after tariffs, after everything else. And he finally puts out an all hands message that's this pablum dreck that says, we're aware and we're really sorry we haven't been communicating. And that's all it says. You're like, dude, really? And he gets a backlash from that because of course he did.
Right, of course.
Like, we all exist and have been working in this business. Where have you been in absentia? So you can't do that. Like, I've learned the hard way. You don't, like, there were times in the aughts when, like, I was in the first dot-com bubble implosion. That actually probably taught me more than anything else because we were running out of money in a startup that was going to die. At one point, I laid off more people than I'd hired. By the way, that's when I met Galloway. Funny story. I met Scott when he was Red Envelope CEO, actually, as he was leaving Red Envelope. But during the course of all that, one of the things I learned is that openness and honesty, not to a fault, but transparency with your team was really essential to getting through hard, challenging times, right? Like, hey, folks, here's the most important things that we have to get done, and we really have to get them done. And we're going to get through this, but here's what we need to do it. And if you're all in it, then we can get through this together is a big part of that. And so that is important. The other part of what you're doing in doing that is you're building trust, right? Like trust to me isn't just psychological safety, it's also transparency to the greatest degree you can get away with doing it. And it's also dependability. Like, can you depend on me as a leader? I'm not just going to say I need to be able to depend on you and the work you do, but you have to be able to depend on me. And by the way, we have a lot of leaders today who are not doing that at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that bugs the living heck out of me too, because we are going back to this sort of command and control environment, but also command and control environment where people are like, I didn't really say that. Right.
So my day job is Zander Media, right? We do sales and storytelling for startups. I've been working with one of my videographers at Zander Media, Jonathan Kofel, who's in Austin, since before there was a Zander Media. We met in 2017. Zander Media founded in late 2018. And we have a film shoot coming up in Boulder and Denver in a couple of weeks. And because we've been working together so long, it's like, great, a meeting that could take an hour takes 3 minutes. He's with his family on a lake in Canada. We get on a quick call. We say, okay, cool, the Airbnb, the gaffer, the grip, the sound, check. I'll see you on that call. And not only is it faster, it's so much more fun. And then the client experiences that, and then the end result shows that. And then the work is so much better, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying anything, again, that we don't already know, but when trust is there, teams move so much faster. I learned that as an acrobat. Like, if the trust isn't there with my fellow acrobats, you land on your head. Legitimately, those are the consequences,
Yeah.
right? It's very problematic.
Yeah.
And when the trust is there, the work is more fun. There is less burnout. The end results are so much better.
Yeah. And there's the severance trust falls type of thing, right? Like no trust falls today, Irv. And you don't have to go to that extreme of things, but I do think that you do need to figure out like, how do we make sure that we are supporting one another and committed to one another? I also think that like one of the things that I had to unlearn early on in my career as a consultant, I was told to be seldom wrong, never in doubt. I'm a smart ass 25-year-old meeting and working with clients who are easily twice my age, who are, deep in their company, have been there for a couple of decades, and I'm supposed to help them out. Ha ha ha. And so of course my boss is telling me I need to be seldom wrong, but never in doubt, right? Because I'm sharp, so you better be on top of it. But if you're showing doubt, you're not showing up very well. Man, as a leader of teams, that bit me in the butt because I was arrogant, right? And it showed through. And I think we still have too many, look, we have a lot of affinity culturally these days for tech leaders who have hit it big because they're contrarians, because they placed big bets against conventional wisdom. And yeah, 95% of those big bets and those people who did that, you've never heard of because they didn't work out. But the 5% who did are convinced that their contrarianism is the right answer for everything and that they are all of that. Yeah. And so it's giving a lot of people a model that just doesn't work in the real world very often. Your odds of success are not very good. And what I've tried to get over myself and had to teach other people is I actually need to be able to say, hey, look, I can have the big aspiration. I can point to the mountain that we need to climb. But I also need to be able to say, I don't fully know how we're going to get there. I don't have the path all laid out. All of us are going to have to figure that out together. Am I pointing too high on the mountain? I don't know yet. But that's where the direction we need to head, and I believe we can do it. And here's the reward for us when we get there. But let's work it together about how we do it, because you're inviting people into the journey with you and help you figure it out. And it took me a decade to figure that out easily.
Well, let's go back a little bit for folks who don't know your background. You were at Slack when we first met. So let's start with the Future Forum and your book. Specifically, what was the Future Forum? And share a little bit about the book that you and Helen wrote. And specifically, I'm curious, like, what you would update if you were to, because that came out a handful of years ago now. What did you get wrong that you would say differently today? But start with Future Forum and then we'll go into the book.
Future Forum itself was a think tank backed by Slack. Slack had a fantastic research team led by Christina Janzer, Lucas Puente, a number of other folks who, like most research groups inside of an organization, their work gets buried internally because it sort of feeds into marketing campaigns or product direction or that type of stuff. I happen to be a complete and utter data geek, like I said, and research affinity is a big thing for me. So I knew them really well and was like big into their work. In 2020, as the pandemic hit, by the way, Slack was office centric as much as anybody in existence.
Interesting.
But we found
Which is
ourselves
counterintuitive to
completely. I told somebody else that today, and they're like, "No way! You guys didn't even have office." I'm like, "Yeah, way, we did. I was in the office 5 days a week, and I made my engineering head from Denver come to San Francisco 20 times in 2019.
wow.
I didn't make him. He came more often than not because he needed to be in the room where it happens, right?
Sure.
But what happened in 2020, we had these debates. Cal Henderson was our chief technology officer. I was one of the product heads. We'd have this debate once every quarter, once every 6 months about, hey, we can't hire enough people in San Francisco. Could we please spin up a remote team? And Cal's like, no way. We don't know how to. It wasn't that he was resistant on the basis of it would never work. It's like, we don't know how to do it. And he was right. We wouldn't have known how to do it. But we got forced into a situation where we quickly had to figure it out. And so then Cal was the first one to flip and goes like, yo, we're changing. Here's how this is going to work. But we were in conversations. I was in conversations. A mess of us were with a bunch of other companies. And like, what are you learning? What are you seeing? The research team had put out a piece of research. They put it in flight around what were people seeing and what was working for whom. And honestly, I was bored with my job. I was running a developer platform team where I was being asked to argue regularly with Stuart, our lovely CEO and founder, about the shape of certain aspects of the business that I felt was in over my head on, and that I was caring about less and less. And so I took the opportunity to raise my hand and say, hey, look, Stuart, you've talked in the past about wanting to have a think tank. I think now's the time to do it. I want to start it. Give me a fraction of my own time, a couple other people, a little bit of money, 6 months, and let's see if we can get something off the ground. And Helen and Sheila Subramanian were the two other people who first joined me on that adventure. They're my co-founders, fantastic, wonderful leaders in themselves. And we combined research that the research team was doing with conversations with the companies and executives, with how are you going through this, what was working, what wasn't. We were willing to talk about stuff that a lot of other companies weren't willing to talk about, like the fact that Black office workers were actually having a better time than white office workers were during the pandemic when it came to sense of belonging. Like our first study that came out in summer of 2020, sense of belonging fell for people with their teams on average. Not a surprise, right? People are used to being in office with one another, and if you shove them all into their homes and put a pandemic in the middle of it, they're going to lose some sense of belonging. It didn't fall. It actually rose for Black office workers. Why? So we got Brian Lowry from Stanford and a couple other people, academics, to come and talk about it. And Brian's like, I'm a Black professor at Stanford. Everybody thinks of it as a liberal school. If I have to walk on that campus 5 days a week and be on and not be Black 5 days a week, 9 to 5, it's taxing. It's exhausting. If I can dial in and out of that situation, damn,
Yep.
it's a release. And that story, I obviously carry with me, today. But it was something that we loved doing. And the whole thing took off and kept growing. And so the book itself was a combination of the research and the practices that we saw out of a whole mess of companies. I think the things we got right is the framing of it is still just a whole set of tools that honestly have nothing to do with how you work.
Yeah.
We had an editor whose line at one point to us was like, you call this a playbook. It's more like a philosophy book disguised as a playbook, because it's back to a lot of things that the responsive group would be very familiar with, to be honest. It's like policies don't matter. No, policies don't work. Principles do, and so do guardrails. Start with the principles about what it's important to us, what matters to us as an organization.
Right. And then what's safe to try.
Exactly. And then talk about things like, what are our team norms? How do teams come together? Focus on outcomes, not on activity levels, right? Like, how do we get aligned around goals and what we do? Invest in training managers to create clarity, build trust, unlock potential. All of these things, you can still pick up the book and apply them today. And you can apply them if you're in the office 5 days a week. You can apply them if you're actually fully distributed. It's a toolkit for basically being a better team leader in a better organization, disguised as how to manage remote and flexible teams. We didn't realize that at the time, by the way. It was just like, this stuff really works, and it works even better in this environment, because if you don't adopt these kinds of practices, you can't fall back
on sitting around the coffee machine.
Yeah, and on the sort of, like, that does work. It's kind of like CEOs fall back on the, I need my managers to be able to know whether or not somebody, is in the office, to know whether or not they're working. Like, wow, that's like the weakest form of management, that's ever good. But unfortunately, it's better than zero. So yeah, I get it.
Yep. Yep. No, I think about at Robin's Cafe. So 16 to 19 ran my little restaurant. And the first couple of times I came in and found that my employees were, sitting around chatting. Well, I mean, there's one specific moment that I will carry with me to my grave. There was a banana peel on our like crystalline white floor, just waiting for a customer to slip and fall in a pile of dirty dishes. And they were just hanging around chatting behind the counter. And like my default was to berate them, right? Like I grew up in an SMB in a small business. Like if your employees aren't showing up in the way that you want, shout at them. And then realized very quickly, I mean, that day in that moment, my job was to inspire and demonstrate and model and back to inspire the quality of show upness, the quality of service that I
Yeah,
wanted my employees to embody. Yes, I could hang out behind the bar and keep an eye on them,
yeah,
but if I was doing my job really well, I was training my manager to create an environment behind the counter so that they wanted to do that, regardless of whether there's an eye in the sky or, the boss behind the counter.
yeah. It's a great place to be. You want them to be doing it for the right reasons and to understand the philosophy behind why they should be doing it, as opposed to you having to write a set of rules and post them up.
Something fascinating to me is you mentioned, kowtowing to the rise of authoritarianism,
Yeah,
both in the workplace and in governments all over the world. And specifically, I think you and I both believe in the Trump administration currently. What if Jonathan and I work better at Zander Media because we have trust, right? If the CEO of a venture-backed tech company can move faster and scale more quickly, which, they have a financial and fiduciary duty to do, because they have trust of their employees and trust of their backers and trust of their customers. And yet we are seeing, let's just say Trump specifically, Trump and Elon had a buddy buddy relationship and then that ended in flames, right? Trust is in short supply in DC. I think probably has always been. I'm not
yeah,
DC native, but like even more so in 2025 than previously in my professional lifetime. What makes the current politics of today successful, besides the fact that Trump is clearly like a charismatic genius
yeah,
and a marketing genius? I mean, the big beautiful bill is catchy, whether we like it or not,
yeah.
as a term. But what is happening in the world today such that these things that you and I have both seen to be successful, and I don't really think most people are going to argue, if you have more trusting teams, your team can work better together, they can do better work, they will be more likely to succeed. That's not a deeply controversial statement. And
Yeah.
yet we are seeing the opposite of that in so many places across the world right now, and particularly in politics. How come?
Man, so many thoughts on this one, and I'm not sure that I've got the world's most wonderful articulation of it. I do think part of it is just like the bifurcation that we've seen of ourselves as a society. Walter Cronkite doesn't exist because CBS News as it was doesn't exist because we no longer have three networks that people turn to for nightly news, right? It just not isn't there. People go to splinter media, right? They're all over the place. Young people get their news from YouTube. Be afraid. Be very afraid.
Not even
Um,
YouTube, TikTok.
TikTok. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. And it is not healthy for us, I don't think, as a society, because like Andor happens to have been written and produced and completely created a couple years back and really fits well with today. So when Mon Mothma gets up and gives the speech in the Senate, which by the way, I'm completely geeking out here with you, but when she gets up and gives this speech, she talks about the fact the death of truth is really the problem that's at work here. And truth can die when people are in different little pocket universes because they're not exposed to something that's more truthful and honest. The problem becomes eventually at some point that lack of truth comes back to bite you. And it did to Pam Bondi this week. So if, this is going to time when we're having this conversation, but this week the Trump administration had to come out and say that, oh my God, I'm having all of a sudden a senior moment. The guy who hung himself in the New York prison, help me out here, Robin.
Epstein.
Jeffrey Epstein. So sorry. The Trump administration came out this week and said that Jeffrey Epstein did in fact commit suicide and that there's not a client list. By the way, the Biden administration had said the same thing a couple of years ago. Pam Bondi and Dan Bongino and several of the other people, Kash Patel, who literally are now in positions of power, were sitting on the outside saying this is BS and they're hiding things
Of
from
course.
you, the deep state and all the rest of this stuff. They then find themselves in the position of power, and all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, we're being expected to deliver this thing. It's not true. We don't have any evidence of it. And by the way, it's actually kind of problematic. We need this to go away. But the fact that they're the ones promulgating a lie, or what appears to have been a lie, by the way, it's a totally believable story, is why they're now in big trouble with their own base, because all of a sudden they're like, no, 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 there's nothing to see here, folks. Go home. Well, wait a minute. You've riled people up in this one pocket area of MAGA around this story. And now that you're in the powerful position, you're telling them that it's not true any longer, and the thing starts to dissolve on you. That's where I think this thing comes back to bite. But the problem I think that we have largely is we don't know what truth is anymore. We don't have institutions that we trust. This is the scary part to me, right? It's not just that we no longer trust, journalists, and we don't trust the government because we haven't for a while. We don't trust universities. We don't trust science, right? By the way, faith in business dropped for the first time last year in 25 years that Edelman has been tracking it.
Oh,
The Edelman
interesting.
Trust Barometer took a dip,
Yep.
and it has not happened before. And that's in part because, you've got CEOs. It's got to be worse in 2025 because all of a sudden you're taking a knee on issues that you said were really important to you as an organization just 6 months prior. It's why Target got in the trouble that it did. So where does trust come from? I think it's got to be rebuilt locally also. I don't have good universal solutions, unfortunately, for this, other than the rise of a equally charismatic voice. Like whether I agree with Mondami in New York's positions or not, I deeply respect his ability to articulate a populist vision that is not exploitative. And I also
And navigate TikTok.
and navigate TikTok, exactly. Which, by the way, is one of those places where I'm just not. Oh, hey, welcome to Brian. Yeah, so I live. I don't. I wish I had better answers on this stuff. I just wish more people who actually had the. I'm disappointed, highly disappointed, in the number of leaders that actually are in positions of power and authority who could lend their voice to at least something that says, "Hey, look, science is real." Let's just start there. Let's just start off with that vaccines do not cause autism. Let's start off with the fact that we also have a community commitment to one another from a health perspective. I'm not talking about where you stand on Roe versus Wade. I'm not going to talk about where you stand on guns. I'm not going to talk about a bunch of other stuff. I'm going to talk about the fact that we have literally a century plus of proven scientific fact when it comes to vaccines, and that the thing that we are risking is our communal health in futzing around with this thing. And we all feel, a lot of us feel that way, but where is that voice coming from beyond the
Right.
scientists themselves who, let's face it, don't have the positional authority to carry that off in the way that, CEOs of major medical institutions would be able to, CEOs of companies who have massive employee bases. They know it. They know it's going to bite them. They know that the combination of ICE's actions plus social net destruction is going to do bad things for frontline workers, which is going to make it hard to run a business.
I paid attention for years in high school to the atomic doomsday clock and
Yeah.
then just kind of grokked back into it. I regret that Elon has stolen the word grok from Heinlein, who coined it, because grok is an excellent word, and now we have
Yeah.
to recognize that it's being used by somebody I detest. One of my core principles is I detest bullies. I was bullied in middle school, and I'm just like, nope, anyone who's a bully is just like not
Yep.
in my book. So anyway, personal
Yep.
anecdote.
Yeah.
But we are currently 89 seconds to midnight, right? So the doomsday clock put out by the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists delineates how close we are to humanity destroying itself.
Yeah.
Throughout my lifetime and probably yours, we've been, 2, 3, 4 minutes to midnight. And we are now, under 2 minutes. We are 89 seconds to midnight as of the beginning of January, or I guess the end of January 2025. I think of myself as relentlessly optimistic. I strive to be the most optimistic, positive, energetic person in any room that I walk into. And yet, I'm a prepper. I, spent a lot of my childhood in the wilderness. I recognize that if an ambulance can't reach me, and, we used to call in emergency medicine, if you're in the wilderness and an ambulance can't reach you,
Yeah.
CPR is a ritual of death.
Yeah.
Like if, I visit the
Yeah.
island of Vieques regularly, my best friend lives out there off of Puerto Rico. We say in Vieques, no hay hospital, which is to say if you're in a car and there's a car crash, you are several hours flight or ferry away from the nearest hospital, and you're probably not going to survive.
Yeah.
We've forgotten how precious life is in the United States, in first world countries, and in a lot of places with privilege in the world. How do you counsel your boys to show up as
Yeah.
men, to show up as protectors, to show up as earners? We live in a capitalist world, so like, great, let me earn my money and also take care of people in the process. How do we do that when faced with the existential dread of humanity, very well could destroy itself in the next couple of generations. And I'm going to fight until my dying breath to make sure that isn't the case.
I'm extraordinarily proud of the two young men my sons are turning out to be, and fortunate in that I had a amazing partner in raising them together, and we did it together. And also sometimes I feel like we just got goddamn lucky because I have too many friends where things have been much harder and more challenging, right? They're 25 and 23 years old. They're both amazingly sharp, thoughtful human beings. I will give some outside credit in a big way. We used to joke, they both went to the JCC for preschool, Jewish Community Center for preschool. They went to a Quaker school here in San Francisco for elementary school. We needed to find a good Buddhist high school to round out their education. But there's something to that. We are not religious. We don't go regularly to church. I was raised Roman Catholic, but fell away from it way early on. There's something to a sort of values-based but non-proselytizing education that they saw that I attribute this to this day to them thinking about issues that are now called social justice in real ways. I'll give you a concrete example. In fourth grade, they did an exercise on homelessness where the teachers had set this up in a room that was too big, where you were told that here's the 5 services you need to get, and here's the 6 tables that provide those services, and they're X distance apart, and you have 15 minutes to figure it out. Go. And that's, by the way, how social services works in San Francisco, except it's far worse. And so it gave them a very real sense of why people who are homeless often struggle on multiple dimensions. Like, wow. And shy of putting them literally in that situation, it gets you a bit more sense of the reality that other people live with. That honestly, we raise these kids in San Francisco in, it's a small house, it's a nice house. We had decent vacations, had way more means than I did growing up, and my wife too, and it scared the shit out of us that they would take that for granted, that it would turn them into something that we'd never liked growing up. But I do think that, helping them understand what's important in life, which is your family, your friends, what it means to take care of other people, what it means to be dependable to other people, to the other people can depend on you, was a really big part of it. I think they also have very healthy relationships. I know they do. We've met some of the relationships they've had along the path, and they're stupendous humans themselves. So all that to say, like, there's an element to this, like, how do you instill values in kids as they're growing up? And there's no one path for doing that. But that, at the end of the day, is going to carry a lot further than did they get a computer science degree, or were they at the top of their class, or too often, I think, especially in the U.S., we focus on the next gold ring, right? And we want our kids to have the next gold ring. And the same thing is true in sports. By the way, my younger son works in the baseball industry as an analyst for a professional baseball team, grew up loving, digging baseball, but didn't do the 18 seasons churn, because we'd seen enough kids get burned out on that stuff too, right? Like the we go for the all-in pursuit of the almost unattainable, and it's not surprising there. It shouldn't surprise the shit out of us, but it continually does that our kids burn out in the pursuit of that, right? And we've done it to ourselves. We pursue that ourselves. I've often struggled with the what is enough, when is enough, and I've gotten better at that probably in the past 5 years than I ever was in my life. But helping your kids get there earlier probably sets them on a better path than having them continually being in the same chase that you found yourself in. And by the way, my hope is, like, we talk to them enough and see what they do and how they talk with their friends and what they're focused on, and I actually feel really good. I have plenty of worries for their generation, but I have fewer worries about their generation.
Hmm.
All the denigration about Gen Z, and oh my God, they get the usual shit that like, I'm Gen X. Literally, they called us slackers. There's a whole movie called Slackers, and the labeling that happens with every generation is happening with these folks too. They are more purpose driven. Thank God. They aren't going to chase the gold ring in the same way we did, because the gold ring doesn't exist in the same way it did for us.
Right.
So why should they?
Yep.
They are more stressed out. They have been overamped on social media. A whole bunch of that stuff is very true. The only things that we can do is try to help them understand what's important to us and spend the time to step back maybe ourselves and say, okay, what really does matter? I'll give you one last bit on this. Clay Christensen is best known for the Innovator's Dilemma, the book that he wrote, and the sort of treatise there. How will you measure your life is the best talk Clay ever gave. And I worked with Clay for a little bit. I worked at HBS my summers between business school, And Clay was finishing up his doctorate at that point in time. And Clay's giving the speech, by the way, after he had a major stroke. And he's struggling to give it. And so I still tear up when I think about it. But it's Clay saying, hey, look, here's the experiences I've seen with my friends that I went to school with. And I'm coming back after the 5-year reunion, right? And everybody's like talking about their jobs and what they're doing and how they're accomplishing. And the 10-year one is like, yeah, now I'm the CEO and I've got this and I've got this, I've raised this amount of money and all this other stuff. And the 15-year reunion, you start seeing the first cracks, which is like, yeah, my first divorce. And in the 20 years, like my kids aren't talking to me.
Hmm.
And things start to fall apart. And the further along you get, the more you're like, what's going to matter at the end? And I don't think it's, even for Elon, maybe it is, does he get to Mars? Maybe it is, how many progeny does he sire? But I think for most of us, you can read all kinds of things about how people think about things at the end, which almost always comes back to, I wish I had spent more time with my family, more time with my friends, more time maybe on myself. And the earlier you can realize that, the earlier you can grasp that, the earlier you can start making small adjustments and give yourself the grace to kind of maybe weave your way back out of that.
I think that's as good a place to wrap as any. Brian Elliott, where can people go to learn more about you, to consume more of your thoughts? What do you write about? Where do you write about it?
Oh my
And of
gosh.
course, Responsive Conference.
Yeah, so come to Responsive Conference, please, God. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me at workforward.com. I also write on Substack, The Work Forward. The Work Forward is the newsletter on Substack. I publish on a weekly basis. Sometimes it's lame, sometimes it's great, but love readership and love feedback.
Great. Thank you for the time. Can't
Robin,
wait
thank you.
to spend time with you on stage in September. And thank you very much for the work that you do.
Many thanks to you too. It's been always a pleasure talking with you and working with you, and you always draw the best out of people.